can't stomach Trump. I think that he's noxious. I think in many ways what Trump is just another opioid. When you're wrong about something, you should change your mind and be honest with people about that.
The chance to hang his vice president and did not call his vice president when their life was in danger.
The idea that Donald Trump endangered anyone's life, it's just absurd. You tweeted at Judge Kavanaugh, "Angry white man, not a good look, Judge Kavanaugh. Leaders don't use that racial comedy and harmony like a toddler who discovered their daddy's gun."
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. The other day I asked in one of my videos if you would all like to see a deep dive into JD Vance, who is Trump's VP pick. And I had a lot of people tell me that they would like to see it. So in this video, we are going to do just that. And it will be pretty comprehensive, I hope. We're going to be going through reactions from different notable figures, which should give a pretty telling view on the feeling that is permeating the internet regarding this. And then I'm going to try and give the strongest case for an upside, as well as his specific positions on certain policy matters that really matter, and also the biggest question marks that I have. And then at the end, we're going to watch a compilation of his best debate moments to see, as per the theme of the channel, how he fares in the battleground of rhetorical ninjutsu. And then I will give my final verdict at the very end for what it's worth. So JD Vance, or James David Vance, is from a poor Rust Belt town in Ohio, where he managed to claw his way out of an upbringing where his parents were divorced, his father abandoned him, and his mother was abusive and had a serious drug and alcohol problem. He joined the Marines after finishing high school in 2003, where he served for a few years, and then he went on to graduate from Ohio State University and Yale Law School. And in 2016, he published his book, Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of a family and culture in crisis, which was a New York Times bestseller and was turned into a movie. And in 2022, Vance was elected as senator for Ohio. So obviously, JD Vance is a very smart guy, a hard worker, and has a story that a lot of Americans can really relate to. And his upbringing and family life story also speaks to a much bigger problem in America, which is the decimation of middle, rural, white, working class America, and actually the death of the American dream that is happening before our eyes. Now, in terms of the initial choice, my reaction was one of disappointment. I was disappointed it wasn't Vivek, even though I kind of knew it wasn't going to be Vivek. As I'd mentioned in other videos, I thought it was going to be Vance or Rubio. And I did say on Twitter that it's going to be a bad choice, but admittedly, in hindsight, I hadn't done enough research on the guy to actually make a properly educated assessment. You know how it is, guys. Sometimes you hear the news and before really thinking about it properly, your fingers just start moving involuntarily. And then all of a sudden you're calling everything gay on Twitter, and story of my life. Anyways, this video, we're going to be giving a proper assessment. So let's start off with some of the endorsements that he's received from people who are way smarter than I am and people that I actually respect a lot.
JD Vance is the VP pick, and I think every person who pays close attention has got to be thrilled by that. And if you don't know much about JD Vance, I'm not even going to make a case for JD Vance. I'm going to tell you what I just saw, which is that every bad person I've ever met in a lifetime in Washington was aligned against JD Vance. And I do think the negative case is often more powerful, because I know of myself, I do not think I'm a particularly good person. I have strong reasons for feeling that way. I don't always think that my side is right. I know for a fact I have been wrong many, many times, and I hope to correct and be honest about my error. So it's not like I think that, I'm always, God's always on my side. Sometimes I'm not on God's side. But I definitely know who's representing the other side. It's a lot easier to tell who the people who are only in it because they like, killing other people in pointless wars. Like, I know who those people are. And their odor is so powerful that I can smell one when he walks in the room. And every single one of those people in a line that would extend from Milwaukee to Chicago was lined up over the last week to knife JD Vance. But because they thought he would be harder to manipulate and slightly less enthusiastic about killing people. That's it. That he would be an impediment to their exercising power. And boy, they went after him in a way I've just kind of never seen.
So big news of the day, obviously, is the nomination of somebody who you know pretty well, your former law school classmate, Ohio Senator JD Vance. Your reaction?
That's right. And I have a different dimension of knowing JD for a long time out of politics. We used to watch Cincinnati Bengals games back in law school in New Haven bars. We didn't even talk politics back then. But what I can say is he's a genuine person. He is somebody who actually cares about this country. He's in public service for the right reasons. We grew up not that far from each other, even in Southwest Ohio. And I can say one of the things about my relationship with him is we've agreed on most things, but even when we disagree, we push each other a little bit. And that's so missing in our American politics today, is original thinkers who are energetic, who are intelligent, who care about the country. He's been one of the most successful senators, in my opinion. He's probably been our strongest fighter in the Senate, and I think he's going to make for an outstanding vice president. I truly believe that.
Can I ask you real quick the importance of the VP pick here today in Milwaukee and how your dad's doing?
My dad's doing great. He's doing well. Obviously, crazy, somber moment, but it's been an important couple of days. I think there's been a lot of reflection. I think we're just incredibly blessed. The VP pick, I couldn't be happier. I don't think it's a secret that that's sort of been my guy for quite some time, and he's done an incredible job in the United States Senate. He articulates the message so well. He even goes into sort of enemy territory with the media and can do that better than a lot of people on our side can do, even with a hometown crowd. But I think his background, his story, when you're talking about the Rust Belt, this is going to be a Rust Belt election. I think Wisconsin's going to play such a critical role in that. Michigan's going to be a critical role in that. Pennsylvania, I mean, that's his battleground. That's his home. Those are his people. So beyond his talents, beyond his intelligence, beyond his business acumen, and frankly what he's accomplished already as a first-term senator, I couldn't be happier with the pick.
Before we get on to the next part, guys, if you don't mind smashing that like button, if you are in fact enjoying the video, that would be amazing. And also subscribing to the channel if you're getting value. Back to it.
My God, JD. I'm thrilled that he's the pick. How about you?
Yeah. I couldn't be happier. And thanks, Megan, for having me. I was pushing for this for quite some time. I was a early endorser of JD's Senate primary when he was at 1 or 2% in the polls in Ohio, and nobody thought he had a chance. And he was up against the establishment and tens of millions of dollars. And that's a story worth telling as well. I was getting very emotional watching that video because JD's a dear friend. And I hope your audience understands, the more you get to know JD Vance, the more you're going to like him. His family is extraordinary. He is a good, smart man. And I put it in that order. He is a decent person of high integrity, wonderful family. He's in it for the right reasons. There are some really important similarities that JD Vance has with President Trump, such as being a class traitor. It's important to remember, Megan, that when that book came out, he was so celebrated by the left-wing elite. He was the keynote speaker at the Aspen Ideas Festival. He was on every major left-wing network, being celebrated as the guy who can explain why Donald Trump has such a big following. And JD Vance, over a series of years, made a decision to forsake that type of popularity and to go in not just a career in politics, but to get into a pattern of advocacy that led him into politics. And it is an extraordinary rise. And you said it so perfectly, Megan, only in America. And only in America is it possible where a young man, and he's older than me, but he's relatively young in the modern political dynamic, can come from absolute poverty, be abused, raised by his grandmother, had all the odds stacked against him to become the nominee for vice president of the United States, for the front runner and former president. How did we get here? Well, I mean, we got here first and foremost through divine providence, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that over the last week, just the fact that this convention is still going on in its current form or fashion. But secondly, it's a testament to JD. JD did not want this, Megan. I hope everyone understands in the audience. Almost everyone who was going for vice president had like war rooms, and they had, lobbying campaigns, and they were going after this to try to buddy up to Trump for the last 9 months or 10 months. When his name was first floated to become Trump's vice president potentially in February and March, he's like, me? Like, what? He's like, yeah, I love Trump, but like, what? And this is a guy who didn't ask for it. He didn't plan for it. He's not full of that kind of naked political ambition that I find to be so disgusting and repulsive. Things just kind of come to him, and people see in him the best of the Trump movement. Forgotten America, someone who lived that story and who will fight for those voters in Washington, D.C.
Trump has just picked Senator JD Vance as his VP. An excellent choice because Marco Rubio is super ultra evil. Very well spoken. I admire his mind. He's very smart, but he's a deep stater, folks. And Trump was signing his death warrant if he did that. That goes the same for the governor and all the rest of it. Carson would have been great, very trustworthy, very smart, very good man. But this is a good choice. JD Vance, vice president for President Trump. And wow, so with all the crazy stuff going on, this is some good news. This is some exciting news. So God bless President Trump. God bless JD Vance, the senator. And just get behind Trump, folks, because the deep state has nothing left to lose.
So those people are all individuals that I have a lot of respect for. And I would actually say all have a very strong political and personal instinct. So that says a lot. And something that I would also like to say that I find personally very endearing about him, which I think is a test for most men, is that he seems like a very good family man. He seems to really love his wife and kids, and the way that he talks about his family is genuine and it's heartfelt, and to me signifies a person who is purpose-driven and a little bit selfless as well. I mean, I personally find it very difficult to find real leadership qualities in a man if he's not a family man when he's above that sort of 40 and over mark. And this is because I think that it's actually a necessary part of a man's development to go from being young and selfish and ambitious to eventually becoming a family man and being a bit more selfless and having a little bit more perspective. Here's something that he said on Tucker, which I liked.
What I was basically saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
So I admire that. And I also admire that he's lost a little bit of weight. I like that he's slimmer. He's got some work to do. Still needs to lose a few kilos, that's for sure, or pounds, whatever you guys call it. But you can see a visible difference from CNN contributor, babyface, chubby face, JD Vance, to Trump VP, bearded Wolverine, on the way to being a physical specimen Vance. And I actually take this quite seriously, because how can you be expected to take care of a country if you can't take care of yourself? I mean, I would not trust carbohydrate Chris Christie as far as I could throw him, and that's not very far. So another big green flag is that the liberal mainstream media are absolutely panicking. They don't like him anymore. And normally, if you want to get a good judge of character, you can listen to what CNN say and listen to what MSDNC say, and you can just think the opposite about the person. Check it out.
You know, part of the reason that JD Vance matters isn't for these kind of short-term electoral calculations. He matters because of what he means to the Republican Party long-term. This is cementing a kind of nationalism. Yeah. Now, Trump, to your point, I agree with you, he's an instinctive, impulsive, intuitive nationalist. JD Vance is an ideological nationalist. That's a much more dangerous virus, because he can make this, he can polish this stuff and make it seem palatable to people. He can sell this stuff to Silicon Valley. He can sell this stuff other places. And what it does is it locks the Republican Party on a pathway that I think is dangerous for the world. Again, the Ukrainians are now in deep trouble. NATO is now in deep trouble. Trump he could have gone with a Nikki Haley and signal to the world, hey, listen, I got to give stuff to my base, but I'm not going to abandon the world. This pick is a horror on the world stage. So JD Vance matters because Donald Trump is pointing the Republican Party in a very scary direction for the long term.
So CNN is saying that Donald Trump should have picked warmonger, military-industrial complex shill Nikki Haley over ideological nationalist JD Vance, because it would be better for the world. And Ukraine? Translating that from CNNese to English is more along the lines of JD Vance is a guy who actually might put American interests first and not the interests of foreign lobbies. And of course, their big donors, the military-industrial complex. I mean, how they manage to say that sort of stuff sometimes with a straight face actually impresses me. Does he realize that he has just turned himself in to a walking, talking billboard for why you should like JD Vance? And on that note, here's what JD Vance really thinks about Ukraine.
I think it's ridiculous that we're focused on this border in Ukraine. I got to be honest with you, I don't really care what happens to Ukraine one way or another.
So half-based, I mean, I really do care about what happens to Ukraine myself, because Ukraine is obviously a white Christian European country, and I think that those countries need to be preserved. I absolutely hate seeing 400,000 young Christian men being sent to their deaths. I think that that's terrible. And I also feel the same about Russia. I mean, Russia is one of the great historical white Christian European nations, magnificent civilization at that. And it would be great if those countries weren't murdering each other and they could form a brotherhood. Ukraine could be a neutral state, but that's for a different video. And now, check out the MSDNC's take here, where they do some very, very impressive mental gymnastics to try and make JD Vance look like a white supremacist.
Goes on, he went a long sort of a paragraph at least about this plot in eastern Kentucky where his 6 generations of his family are buried. And his hope is that his wife and he are eventually laid to rest there and their kids follow them. And I sort of understand the idea of sharing the burial plot, but it also it reveals someone who believes that the history that the family should inherit, and indeed the history that should be determinative in the story of the Vance family, is the history of the Eastern Kentucky Vances, and not the Vances from San Diego, which is where his wife is from and where her Indian parents are from. But in America, it doesn't always have to be the white male lineage that trumps that defines the family history, that branch of the tree supersedes all else. And I just think the construction of this notion reveals a lot about someone who fundamentally believes in the supremacy of whiteness and masculinity. And it's couched in a sort of halcyon, revisitation of his roots, but it is actually really revealing about what he thinks matters and who America is. And that America is a place for people with a shared Western background. And that is the idea of America. That is the nation of America that he wants to resurrect.
So just another very odd take there by MSDNC. The fact that the guy wants to be buried near his family shows that he cares about legacy and homeland and tradition, something that the mainstream media would know nothing about. Okay, so with that in mind, guys, some of the major positives. Let's have a look now at some of the positions that he has taken on important issues. Starting with vax and mask mandates, he sarcastically said vax and mask mandates in New York are working great to stop the spread, which they weren't. He said say no to vax passports and mandates, and also said great to see workers all across America defying vax mandates. So that was back in 2021. Pretty based on that issue. What are his thoughts on the 2020 election?
You've been mentioned as a possible vice president for Donald Trump. Had you been vice president on January 6th, would you have certified the election results?
Oh, George, this is such a ridiculous question, in part because the law has changed here. We, of course, had
I didn't ask you about going forward. I asked you what you would have done. I asked you what you would have done.
George, here's what I think. Here's what I think happened in 2020. And I know you guys are obsessed with talking about this. I have to make a point here. You constantly say to people like me, why do you talk about January the 6th? Why do you talk about the election of 2020? And then you ask about us multiple times during a 6-minute interview. But look, you asked the question and I'll answer it. Do I think there were problems in 2020? Yes, I do. Do I think it was a problem that big technology companies working with the intelligence services censored the presidential campaign of Donald Trump? Yes. Do I think it's a problem that Pennsylvania changed its balloting rules in the middle of the election season in a way that even some courts in Pennsylvania have said was illegal? Yes, I think these were problems, George, and I think there is a political solution to those problems. So litigating which slate of electors was legitimate, I think is fundamentally the political solution to the problems that existed in 2020. It's a reasonable debate to have, and I find it weird, George, that people like you obsess with what I call what happened in 2020. You're so incurious about what actually happened in 2020, which is why so many people mistrust our elections in this country. We've got to do better, George.
I'm not the least bit incurious. In fact, you laid out a litany there, but you didn't answer the question I asked. Would you have certified the election results had you been vice president?
If I had been vice president, I would have told the states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and so many others that we needed to have multiple slates of electors, and I think the U.S. Congress should have fought over it from there. That is the legitimate way to deal with an election that a lot of folks, including me, think had a lot of problems in 2020. I think that's what we should have done.
So it's very clear you would have done what Donald Trump asked you to do there, not what Vice President Mike Pence did.
How about the administrative or deep state?
So a lot of conservatives have said we should deconstruct the administrative state. We should basically eliminate the administrative state. And I'm sympathetic to that project. But another option is that we should just seize the administrative state for our own purposes. We should fire all of the people. I mean, I think Trump is going to run again in 2024. I think he'll probably win again in 2024. And he'll win by a margin such that he will be the president of the United States in January of 2025. I think that what Trump should do, like if I was giving him one piece of advice, Fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people. And when the courts, because you will get taken to court, and then when the courts stop you, stand before the country like Andrew Jackson did and say the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it. Because this is, I think, a constitutional level crisis.
How about war? I mean, we mentioned that he was anti the funding of the war in Ukraine, which is a big positive. But what about with Israel? What about wars with China and Iran and places like that? Well, that might tell a slightly different story. He had this to say about the American weapons industry.
We're actually sending weapons to Ukraine so fast that it's eliminating our ability to plan for a contingency in East Asia, in the Middle East, or something else that would affect our own national security. So it's good to make more American weapons with American workers and in American factories. It's bad to send them overseas at a faster rate than you're actually building them.
We're going to get to more of that soon. For now, let's have a little bit of a talk about some of the major question marks around JD Vance. So the most obvious one is that he used to be a massive anti-Trumper. He used to be a never Trump guy. Let's have a look at a compilation of him talking about this.
As somebody who doesn't like Trump myself, the elites were right about Donald Trump, right? I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him. He's the best president of my lifetime, and he revealed the corruption in this country like nobody else. I can't stomach Trump. I think that he's noxious and is leading the white working class to a very dark place. I think that he was a good president. I think he made a lot of good decisions for people.
I take it you're not a Trump supporter from what I've read. Am I right? Is that a fair assessment? Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't vote for Trump. All around, he was a great president. I'm 37 years old. Certainly the best president of my lifetime. Yeah, it's unfortunate in a lot of ways because I think in many ways what Trump is just another opioid. He's something that's going to take the pain away. He's going to make people feel better for a little while. But at the end of the day, the problems are still going to be there, and Donald Trump isn't going to make them.
And let's talk about the problem.
So you get the point. He was vehemently anti-Trump when that was the way that the wind was blowing. And obviously the part about Trump being an opioid, and he also said that Trump could be America's Hitler, which is just kind of dumb and ridiculous. And it doesn't matter when you say it, but to call him an opioid, considering that he's from this middle America town that has been ravaged by opioids and he's had that problem in his family, seems like a very deep and personal insult. But then all of this seemed to turn around. Now, I'm not exactly sure when this switch happened. I know it did happen at some point, and if you guys want to let me know in the comments when exactly that shift started to happen, that would be great. But we know it did happen. And what we also know is that he needed Donald Trump's endorsement in his Senate race in Ohio in 2022. And when he got Trump's endorsement, he went from third to first and then ended up winning.
Such a great endorsement to have, obviously, the leader of the party and the leader of the broader movement here. And I think given how much my opponents have attacked me for criticizing Donald Trump 6 years ago, it's good to have that sort of stamp of approval from the man himself saying, look, I trust this guy. I believe in this guy. He's going to be the best senator for the state of Ohio. So it really accomplishes a lot for the campaign, and I think gives us the momentum we're going to need to win this thing.
So essentially, he owes his political career to Donald Trump, and now he at least carries himself like a loyalist. And there are a lot of good people out there who didn't trust Trump in 2016. They had serious and well-founded reservations about him being president. And then moreover, to see what Donald Trump did in office and then to be able to change your mind is actually commendable if it's genuine. So let's have a listen to his explanation about why he changed his mind.
Yeah, well, I think the simple answer is you've got to respect the American people enough to just level with them. Look, I was wrong about Donald Trump. I didn't think he was going to be a good president, Brett. He was a great president, and it's one of the reasons why I'm working so hard to make sure he gets a second term. I think you should. When you're wrong about something, you should change your mind and be honest with people about that fact. And I actually think, again, whether this is running as his running mate or running and supporting him as United States Senator, Brett, I think it actually presents a real opportunity to talk to the American people, because a lot of people didn't think Trump was going to be a good president, and a lot of people were happy to be proven wrong. And I think it presents an opportunity for me to make the case to the American people that, look, we have two very different sets of results. 4 years of Joe Biden, 4 years of Donald Trump. We know the Trump record is one of success. The Biden record is one of failure. I came around to Donald Trump, and I think that a lot of Americans will do the exact same thing.
So this is all well and good, but there are a few things to really consider here. First of all, the timeline. Was there an incentive to change your mind? i.e. the Ohio Senate race, and was this just a political move? Secondly, just how strong the rhetoric was. He wasn't just saying he doesn't like the guy, he called him an opioid and said that he could be America's Hitler. That's the sort of gay liberal rhetoric that would normally be a really good indicator that somebody's not really worth listening to. Thirdly, this is not just somebody who's going to vote for Trump or be a part of the MAGA big umbrella that everybody loves to talk about. This is somebody who's going to be his right-hand man, somebody who is going to have to be trusted to follow him into battle and to have his back when the shit inevitably hits the fan. Trump has had the fake news media relentlessly come after him. Then the constant lawfare attacks, and now somebody has come within centimeters of taking his life. He needs to be able to trust whoever his VP pick is without so much as a second thought. They need to win that election, get to the shores of the White House and burn the boat. They need to fight, fight, fight. And on that topic, I want to tell you guys about this amazing design that we've got on the reality-based store. We did a poll the other day on the YouTube community asking you guys what you think our best design is, and the fight, fight, fight design won easily. And what this is, guys, is it's 3 photos of Donald Trump from when he announced to when he got the mugshot, and of course, the shooting photo. Now, I did design this myself, guys, not giving myself a pat on the back or anything, but I am excited about it. And you guys can get it on a shirt as well as a hoodie. So if you guys want to get the most based merch in the game, there's that design and so many more. Check out the reality-based store. Links are all going to be below. Catalog is below. Make sure to go check it out. Support the channel and support a based cause. So back to it now, guys. To summarize that last point, this cannot be another Judas Mike Pence moment who abandons his general on the battlefield. He needs to be an unapologetic loyalist who will take a bullet for Donald Trump. And I just don't know if JD Vance is that guy in his heart of hearts. And now onto the topic of war. Let's have a listen to some of the things that JD Vance has said about Iran in particular.
A lot of people recognize that we need to do something with Iran, but not these weak little bombing runs. If you're going to punch the Iranians, you punch them hard, and that's what he did when he took out Soleimani. By the way, that action, people said that it would lead to broader war. It actually brought peace. It actually checked the Iranians and slowed them down a little bit. But let me just say something about this Iran issue, because maybe the most important diplomatic breakthrough of the Trump administration was the Abraham Accords. If you want to check Iran, the way to do it is to, one, withdraw their oil money, which of course Joe Biden's been bad about, but you've also got to enable the Israelis and the Sunni Arab states to work together and actually provide a counterbalance to Iran. Joe Biden has done nothing. You have the infrastructure there, sitting there to weaken Iran, to strengthen our ally Israel. Joe Biden's done nothing with it. Donald Trump would reinvigorate it.
So I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about this, but those of you who watch the channel will know that I am no fan of needless wars in the Middle East. I revile neocon politicians who have led the United States, as well as my countrymen in Australia, to pointless wars and led young men to their deaths for no reason. And I have absolutely zero interest in seeing the Western world go to war with Iran. They have been saying that Iran will have nuclear weapons for decades, and they never do. Furthermore, they lied to us about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So what makes you think that they wouldn't lie to get into another war? Especially when you consider that war with Iran has been the objective for decades. And if you read the Clean Break Memorandum, which is publicly available information, public knowledge, then it becomes clear. And too much to go into for this video. It would be a whole video in itself. So if you guys would like to see this, then let me know below. I'll at some point try and do a full breakdown on that, or I'll do a reality-based podcast with an expert about it. Let me know what you think. Moreover, Candace Owens responded to Vance's Iran rhetoric saying, like, is it possible for us to get one effing person in office who doesn't immediately speak about how we need to continue bombing the Middle East? We do not need to do anything with Iran. I agree with her on that one. Okay. So with all that in mind, guys, let's now have a look at a compilation of a few times where JD Vance has been in the belly of the beast. Is he tough? Can he debate? Can we be sure that when he gets on that debate stage against Kamala Harris, that he will completely outclass her?
Because as I mentioned, there is an open question of who Donald Trump will pick to be his vice presidential candidate. We just heard him talking about Marco Rubio. You're hosting a fundraiser with him in your home state of Ohio later this month. I know you say that you two haven't discussed the vice presidency directly, but you said you'd certainly be open to it if he did offer it to you. Considering that, Does it give you any pause whatsoever about taking that job when you see how he treated his last vice president?
Well, Caitlin, first of all, again, I haven't talked to Donald Trump about becoming vice president. I think it's important to support President Trump as Republicans because I think he was a good president. And I think that he made the country more prosperous. And I think he made the world more peaceful. What gives me pause, Caitlin, is another 4 years of Biden's administration where he's opened the borders and where you have effectively a conflict, a major world conflict in nearly every continent in the world.
But my question was not about President Biden. It's about President Trump.
Well, look, it's fundamentally about President Biden because if you're comparing the two records of these presidents and asking, who do I want to be president? It's very clearly that I want Donald Trump to be president. And I understand that there are a lot of things that people like you disagree that he did, but I think fundamentally he was a good president. He accomplished a lot for the country. And the question fundamentally for our country is, do we want 4 more years of Joe Biden or do we want 4 more years of the peace and prosperity of Donald Trump? That to me is an easy question.
The last time I checked, President Biden wasn't approving of the chance to hang his vice president and did not call his vice president when their life was in danger on Capitol Hill, something that Mike Pence himself has testified to. So my question is, does it give you any pause to be his vice president, given how he has treated Mike Pence?
Caitlin, I'm extremely skeptical that Mike Pence's life was ever in danger. I think politics people like to really exaggerate things from time to time. I know a lot of folks in the Democratic Party.
Senator.
A lot of folks in the Democratic Party, Caitlin, act as if January the 6th was the scariest moment of their lives. I think, look, January 6th was a bad day. It was a riot. But the idea that Donald Trump endangered anyone's lives when he told them to protest peacefully, it's just absurd. And the entire legal basis of this prosecution of Donald Trump from Jack Smith.
But they were chanting that they wanted to hang him.
Look, Caitlin, did a few people say some bad things? Sure, but do we blame Donald Trump for every bad thing that's ever been said by a participant in American democracy? I think that's an absurd standard. And look, Caitlin, I know you're worried, and I think justifiably so, about
this isn't about me,
threats
Senator.
to
I'm
American...
asking questions about you and how you would feel about this.
I'm trying to answer the question. I appreciate if you let me. We know that there are threats to American democracy. I think the biggest threat to American democracy, Caitlin, is that the Biden administration is trying to prevent Donald Trump from campaigning and taking his case to the American people, even as they hide their own candidate.
That's presiding over that case. The Biden administration is not preventing Donald Trump from campaigning. He just did 2 campaign events tonight.
This is a really important point, Caitlin. Who is the number 3 person from the Biden Department of Justice who went to work for the New York prosecutor just months before he brought this case against Donald Trump? You can't have people moving from the Biden administration to prosecute Donald Trump in New York and say it has nothing to do with the Biden administration, especially when the judge is the Biden administration donor.
To local DA's offices all the time. That's not that unusual. I mean, you're an attorney, you know that.
It's pretty
you probably
unusual.
Have colleagues who went to Yale with you that did that.
It's pretty unusual for the number 3 person in the Department of Justice to then go to the New York prosecutor's office to bring a bogus case against Donald Trump, and then to have the judge presiding over that case to be a donor to Biden-Harris. I think that's pretty unusual, Caitlin, and really is, aside from your views or anyone else's views about Donald Trump, this is a real threat to Americans' trust in the legal system. If you look at polling, even a lot of folks who are going to vote for Joe Biden think that the lawfare against Donald Trump is bogus. We're destroying faith in the American system of law and order to try to bring down Joe Biden's political opponent. That's a threat to democracy. Joe Biden appointed the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who of course answers to Joe Biden, can be fired by Joe Biden. So the idea that the Biden administration has nothing to do with the appointment of the special prosecutor, I think completely betrays a misunderstanding of how our system of government actually works. And of course, Kristen, we have to make this point, Kristen, that the prosecution of Donald Trump in New York, which I think now is fundamentally been thrown in doubt by this immunity case, it was one of the main guys was a Department of Justice official in the Biden administration who jumped ship to join a local prosecutor's office to go after Donald Trump.
And yet the DOJ told
doesn't make you question the legitimacy of the prosecution. That's a problem.
Well, Senator, that happens all the time. People are appointed from Washington, but the DOJ told Congress, testified this week
Kristen,
that it reviewed
it happens.
Hold on, Senator.
Are
let
you
me
really
finish.
saying, Kristen?
Senator, let me finish my sentence.
All
then
the time.
I'll let you finish. Hold on.
The number.
Let me just finish this. The DOJ told Congress this week it reviewed all communications since Biden took office and found no contact between federal prosecutors and those involved with that case in New York. Can you stick to the substance of the question, though? Let me just ask, because I just want to stick with this line of theory that you are laying out, which is you are saying it's not okay for Joe Biden to weaponize the Justice Department. If it's not okay for Joe Biden to weaponize the Justice Department, as you say, which there's no evidence of that, why is it okay for Donald Trump to do that?
Well, Kristen, first of all, you said that it happens all the time, that the number 3 person in the Department of Justice jumps ship to join a local prosecutor's office to go after the president's political opponent. I don't think that's ever happened in the history of American democracy, and I don't think that we should legitimize it. Now, if Donald Trump's attorney general had his number 2 or his number 3 jump ship to a local prosecutor's office in Ohio or Wisconsin, and that person then went after Donald Trump's political opposition, that's a different conversation.
Senator,
all he's suggesting is that we should investigate credible arguments of wrongdoing. That's all that Donald Trump is saying. That is not a threat to democracy. That's merely reinforcing our system of law and government.
Bottom line, you are okay with Donald Trump appointing a special prosecutor to go after his political enemies, which would include Joe Biden. You're just, to button that up, it sounds like you're saying yes. The Biden campaign has said Project 25, quote, should scare every single American. It would give Trump limitless power over our daily lives. Among the things they are calling for is reversing approval of the abortion pill, mifepristone. But Donald Trump says he supports access to that pill, actually. Do you support access to abortion medication as Donald Trump does?
Well, Kristen, you asked about Project 2025, and I want to be clear here. That Trump explicitly has said his own transition team runs the Trump transition and will run the Trump administration. Again, you have a whole host of organizations, some of which have good ideas, some of which have bad ideas, and some of which have both. And I'm sure the Trump administration will talk to a lot of people as it's crafting an agenda to bring back American manufacturing jobs, to lower inflation, and to bring peace and prosperity back to the world. That's the whole reason why me and so many others are trying to reelect Donald Trump, is because the agenda actually worked. It was his agenda, and I think it'll work again for the American people. On the question of the abortion pill, what so many of us have said is that, look, we certainly don't, the Supreme Court made a decision saying that the American people should have access to that medication. Donald Trump has supported that opinion. I support that opinion. I think it's important to say that we actually have to have an important conversation in this country about what our abortion policy should be. Donald Trump is the pragmatic leader here. He's saying most abortion policy is going to be decided by the states. We want to make it easier and more affordable for young women and parents to have families to begin with. We want to lower housing costs, eliminate those surprise medical bills that so many families see after they have a baby. That's the Trump and Republican approach to this issue. Meanwhile, Joe Biden wants taxpayer-funded abortion up to the moment of birth. It's so crazy to me how the Democrats frame this as Republicans. Just let me finish, Kristen. They frame Democrats as being reasonable and pragmatic, when in reality, Republicans are the one trying to find some common ground here.
As you know, very few abortions take place later in pregnancy, and almost always because there is a medical emergency.
All right, Senator Lujan, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ms. Sohn, thank you for coming before us today. So I want to take my line of questioning in a slightly different direction from some of the other folks. And I think, just to be direct with you, Ms. Sohn, there are actually areas of substantive agreement between the two of us on some of these issues. But I also notice that you are a participant in what I would call this weird racialization of American political rhetoric in the last few years. And in particular, I think coming out of a desire to give equal opportunity and fairness to every American, regardless of skin color. That's, of course, a very good thing. There's been this weird trend in certain corners of American politics to be very, very racialized, and even to criticize explicit racial groups almost as a pejorative. And you, unfortunately, have participated in that. And I want to ask just a couple of questions on that. And before I do, I want to illustrate this by pointing out something that's going on in my state. We have a very, very bad train crash in East Palestine, Ohio. It's caused a terrible chemical spill, likely environmental consequences as far as the eye can see. And of course, we're doing as much as we can to help constituents on the ground. But I note that Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg yesterday, when he made some public remarks, instead of commenting on this or talking about the issue or giving any reason to think that he's focused on one of the major transportation mishaps in this country over the last couple of years, he decided to instead focus on the terrible scourge of too many white men in the construction industry. And I find that preposterous, both on its own face, but also as a focus from the Secretary of Transportation. So I want to read you a tweet with that backdrop in mind. And I quote, "President Obama is a raggedy black supremacist president, and his cowardly enablers would rather kill everybody than stop killing white people." Do you think a person who said that should be appointed or confirmed to the FCC?
Could you read? I didn't quite get that. Could you just reread that? Would you mind?
President Obama is a raggedy black supremacist president, and his cowardly enablers would rather kill everybody than stop killing white people. Do you think a person, yes or no, who says that should be appointed to the FCC?
I would need to know more of the context, honestly.
Okay, well, I think
really
clearly a person who said that should not be appointed to the FCC.
Okay.
And in fact, you retweeted the exact same thing, only with President Trump instead of President Obama, and the race is reversed. Let me read another tweet, and let me ask you if this is an acceptable thing for an FCC commissioner. "Angry black woman, not a good look, Judge Brown Jackson." Would a person who tweeted that pejoratively be deserving of the position that you're seeking?
I think it has nothing to do with the position that they're seeking, so not necessarily.
So I think that's
I know I tweeted something about
come
Judge
on.
Kavanaugh, right?
I think that's preposterous. Come on. You tweeted at Judge Kavanaugh, "Angry white man, not a good look, Judge Kavanaugh." Now, here's why I think that it's relevant. We live in a country that's very diverse. People come from very different backgrounds. And one of the things that preserves what little racial comedy and harmony we have in this country is that our leaders don't use that racial comedy and harmony like a toddler who discovered their daddy's gun. You talk about racial issues in a way that will inflame the very worst things in our country. And I fear that if you're given this position of authority, you will use that authority to continue to inflame and to continue potentially even to censor based on some of these ideas. Now,
So, I mean, the man can definitely debate, can definitely string a sentence together and turn a phrase. And so in conclusion, I mean, JD Vance has an amazing story, and the fact that he's had to dig it out of the mud says a lot. And I suspect that he's a man of immense character, good family man, and definitely has a lot of positions that I would agree with. However, the big question mark is, will he be the warrior, right-hand man that Donald Trump needs? And also, will he be somebody that encourages warmonger neocon politics? The fact of the matter is, guys, that we just don't know. So if you haven't checked out the Reality Based store, I would highly, highly suggest that you do that. It's all below. Go have a little browse, see if there's anything you like. And if you'd like to check out my socials, they're all going to be down below there. If you'd like to see my finger spasms on Twitter. And if you'd like to subscribe to the channel, if you're getting value right here. And if you'd like to watch another one, right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.